Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot simplify the complex use cases and deliver powerful automation that cyber teams need. CyberSaint's integrated risk management solution ingests data from your existing tech stack, dynamically lighting up controls using patented AI. Leverage your expertise and showcase business value. Let your risk and compliance solution work for you. See why the most forward-thinking CISOs of the Fortune 500 support their teams with CyberSaint. Maximize your cybersecurity program today. Visit securityweekly.com/CyberSaint SCW. Did you know that over 63% of cyber breaches are caused by a third-party vendor? CyberGRX is on a mission to modernize third-party cyber risk management. Built on the market's first third-party cyber risk exchange, CyberGRX arms you with fast and accurate data, a proven and innovative approach, so you can make rapid, informed decisions and confidently engage with partners. Learn how partnering with CyberGRX will help you become cyber certain. Visit securityweekly.com/CyberGRX. RSA offers business-driven security solutions that provide organizations with a unified approach to managing digital risk and designed to effectively detect and respond to advanced attacks, manage user access control, and reduce business risk, fraud, and cybercrime. For a limited time, get mobile multi-factor authentication from RSA Secure ID Access for free to help secure your remote or dynamic workforce long-term. Leverage push notification, biometric, and one-time password authenticators to secure access to your cloud applications, on-premises systems, legacy systems, privileged accounts, and more at no cost for 6 months. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/RSA Security.
Welcome back to Security and Compliance Weekly. Hey, do you always end up missing our live streams? Or do you need somewhere to flag Security Weekly podcasts that you want to listen to? Subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher or on the YouTube channel. You can also sign up for our mailing list and join our Discord server to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly. You can do all this by going to securityweekly.com/subscribe. Also, in our upcoming webcasts and technical trainings, you will learn how to prevent phishing scams and how to move beyond vulnerability scan to vulnerability fix. There's a vulnerability theory in there somewhere. Anyway, to do all this, you go to securityweekly.com/webcast to see what we have coming up and to register, of course. And if you want to peruse our portfolio of previously recorded webcasts and trainings, you go to securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, enough of that. We're going to shift gears in this segment and take the time to formally introduce you to one of our new co-hosts, Mr. Fredrick Free Lee. Just as a caveat or an introduction, we at Security and Compliance Weekly, we've been plotting for the last month or two how we could sort of work some of the people that we've been talking to through the year that we've had great conversations with into the mix. So we came up with the idea of let's start inviting some people to be occasional co-hosts. So we're putting together a cadre of co-hosts that'll start rotating in during the show. We've started it already, obviously, with Flea, but in the coming months into 2021. So that's sort of the context of what we're doing, and why does this guy Flea show up on the show? Anyway, as far as introduction, I first met Flea, I think it was back in 2017. Coincidentally, we were at the O'Reilly Security Conference in New York City. So this is O'Reilly Day. I feel like I should just drink whiskey, just in principle. I remember listening to Flea give his presentation, very engaging speaker. He had an interesting topic, if I recall. And more importantly, at the time, he was working as the Chief Information Security Officer or head of director or whatever his title was at Square. And I was very interested in Square, still am, from a PCI perspective, and how did and does Square approach PCI compliance as a service provider? How they take care of all their little merchant customers that are, selling handmade quilts and doilies at yard sales and flea markets and stuff like that. Flea markets, I get it. That was that incidental. Oh. If you want to see his original interview on Paul's Security Weekly, it was episode 665. And other than that, Flea, welcome officially and formally to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me, and I'm really glad that even in the intro to me, you have to say PCI because I guess at some point we're going to really injure your liver just from the PCI chat. So happy to be here.
You're gonna bankrupt me before you do anything to my liver. It must be the Irish.
He's already ahead of you, Jeff.
That's true. Hey, well, Flea, like everybody else that comes to the show, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how'd you get into the business, and how'd you end up where you are today?
Yeah, so as you already said, my government name is Fredrick Lee. Nobody calls me that except for my parents. Most people call me Flea. I'm currently the chief security officer for a company called Gusto. We're actually focused on making a people platform, helping small businesses and medium-sized businesses take care of the employees that they have. Prior to Gusto, I was, the head of security / CISO at a fintech company called Square, which obviously was in the payments industry, which, as you mentioned earlier, is how you and I actually came to meet. How did I get into security? Which I always think is like, I don't believe that anybody has exactly the same answer. I do know that for people of a certain generation, that there's like maybe a couple of different avenues, and actually sometimes they even had similar avenues. Oftentimes you either got into security because at some point in your life you were a sysadmin, and that's literally, yep, hey, you know something about computers, go fix the computers. Hey, somebody broke into the computers, make sure that people can't break into computers. The other side of that, though, which is actually, I guess, more of how I got started, was effectively a teenager with too much internet access and too much free time on their hand. Was just fundamentally actually just curious about how computers worked, how the internet worked. I personally think it's actually probably a little bit more traditional than people actually think it is with regards to people getting into security. Because most of the people, even as a teen, I don't believe that most of the people that were, exploring technology had any kind of malicious intent. It was purely like, hey, I want to know how this works, and then parlay that into some kind of future job. When I went to college, I majored in electrical engineering initially. Like, I'm old enough that this whole idea of becoming rich or like famous or whatever from actually tinkering on computers was a foreign idea, right? So I went into electrical engineering just because I thought electric vehicles were cool. This is way back in the day where tons of universities were starting their own little solar racing teams, so, like think, late 80s, early 90s, that kind of era. And that was way before you could make money in computers, way before you could really get a good job doing security, and even more so way before you could get a job in the commercial sector doing computer security. So that's a little bit about how I got started. I think my first real paid security job was more than likely when I joined Bank of America. That was actually pretty late in my career, in my life, but it was early in the industry. This is at the time where people actually were saying like, hey, we're starting to put stuff on the internet. We should probably care about how that works. Hey, we have a bunch of money here. We actually want to keep the money that we have. And I think Bank of America actually recognized the need for, really mature cybersecurity program a little bit earlier than a lot of other financial players. And yeah, that's how I got my official job in security. So.
Excellent. I don't know if you remember this, and this is totally off topic, but one of the things that I remember most about being in New York City the day I met you at the O'Reilly Security Conference was later that day, I snuck off I found a cigar lounge, of course, that's what I do. And it was the same day that there was a terrorist attack in New York City. And all of a sudden I'm getting phone calls from home like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, I was sitting in a cigar bar, oblivious to everything. And, I think I did hear sirens wailing and stuff like that.
You were just oblivious from the whiskey.
It could be.
No. You don't drink enough to be able to. No, no, you don't get oblivious from the whiskey.
But it was a memorable day because it was New York City. I think it was Halloween. I think they dubbed it the Halloween terrorist attack. A guy drove a truck into a crowd and killed a bunch of people. That's the day Flea and I met.
Is it really?
The day that lived in infamy. Yep.
Wow.
Fortunately, it's been an upward trajectory for you and I since then. But yeah, no, I remember that just because
you're not at Square anymore,
wasn't that far from from my my hotel. Yeah.
So let's be clear. So your relationship has gotten better ever since the terrorist attack.
Pretty much.
Well, it didn't have a negative impact on our relationship, at least. So
okay. I'm just saying, Jeff's like, well, it's gotten better since then. I'm like, well, it was a pretty bloody low bar at the start. Okay, so
sometimes you just got to take your wins where you can get them, right?
Amen. Now, so you've been around the block in fintech, a people company, Gusto. You've been, a childhood. That's interesting. What happens if I twiddle this wire, or switch or whatever? Where do you see your trajectory going, Flea?
Where do I see my trajectory going? I think probably the thing I'm most passionate about in security is bringing more people into security. And I know it sounds like cliched, et cetera, but I still think that our view of security is still way too narrow. And one of the things that I try to focus on right now is bringing more engineers into security. More people who previously thought that, hey, this is too complex or this isn't interesting, et cetera, bringing them into the industry. I mean, actually take advantage of all the things you can get when you have more builders working on the problem. It was interesting that we were just talking about CyberSane and some of the stuff that you're doing around automation. There's just so much additional room in our industry to actually bring even more technology into it to make security not only available as a career path for more people, but also make security as an attribute more available to other companies. Right. So, obviously, like my last couple of jobs, really, they've been actually hyper focused on dealing with effectively people that didn't have the same access to resources. So you think about Square, this is a company that was all about making, the payment industry accessible to small, medium-sized businesses. Gusto is all about making some of those big business, like HR capabilities accessible to, small businesses. And I do think that security, unfortunately, has been something that has been out of reach for a lot of, small players, startups, small businesses, et cetera. So you think about, some of the things we see going on even now, obviously, as we're recording this, COVID is still very much a thing, and how that is impacting some of these small, medium-sized businesses. They don't have the same access to some of the security capabilities that allows their employees to work from home securely and confidently, right? So what can we as an industry do to actually expand that? I hope that as I keep growing in my career, I can help companies continue to actually build innovation that actually, democratizes security, but I also hope at the same time I can bring more people into the industry to help democratize the industry, because in and of itself, security, risk management, risk measurement, that's actually something that every single human thinks about. Every single human is doing this on a day-to-day basis to some extent. And it's like, well, how do we actually take the existing skills that you fundamentally have? That's what allows you to survive. And how do we tune the skills that you have, give you additional skills, additional knowledge, so you can apply it to this industry that has a ridiculously large amount of unfilled roles. It is the cliche that, security kind of has a 0% unemployment rate. And how do we actually bring more people along for this journey, get more people involved, and apply whatever their natural skills are into an area that that they can actually flourish in. And I personally think that there is an area in security for everybody. I agree if they want it.
No, I agree. And actually, I want to say two things. One is not to you, sir. One is to our Discord crew. They're talking about pen tests and they're arguing about what a pen test is. And I want to point out that Scott and I actually, off SCW, as part of our professional business, Red Lion, we interviewed, I think it was 40 people, and asked them one question: what's a pen test? And none of them agreed. And these are all professional in the security industry professionals. None of them agreed. So I love the fact that they're trying to decide what a pen test is, and nobody knows. So that's one thing. But that was not to you, Flea. Sorry. The second thing is your point about bringing more people into security, and there's a place for everybody. I think that's great. I really do. And I think that your effort and the efforts you've made, even just talking today about making language work for everybody so that we can all speak the similar languages, massively huge. And actually, I'm going to add a third one, which is a personal story. My daughter was born about 2.5 years ago. And I don't know if this is cliched or not. I have no idea if this is normal, but she was born, she was healthy, thank you, God. It's wonderful. It's lovely. She cried. Life is good. And then I realized, holy crap, she's here and the whole world is dangerous. And I had to reevaluate risk on the fly for my entire universe based on the fact that she's so much more infinitely fragile than anything I knew. And she was the only thing I cared about in terms of risk. And I don't know if that's universal or if I'm just paranoid or weird, but like literally it crashed down on me that walking across the street, which for me is a very low but calculated risk, as it is for every normal human that I know of, all of a sudden it changed drastically. And it's
I don't know if it speaks anything to you, Josh, but my 4 children were wrapped in about 4 feet of bubble wrap up until the time they were 18, just so nothing bad could happen to them. It's a parenting thing. It's a dad thing.
Thank you. Okay, I figured it might be.
I know that I was raised in the South, and maybe there might be a different approach to how you actually raise children there. Because I know tons of things that, in particular, things that our uncle let us do. Obviously when my mom wasn't around, probably are not the kind of things that you would allow a child to do these days. But I think some of the philosophy there was also teaching kids to actually take calculated risk, right? So my uncle, and actually I would say that actually my parents as well, because they're, country strong, they both grew up on farms, was this whole idea like, hey, you also have to introduce your kids to risk taking. And you have to teach them how to make good choices and bad choices.
As it's appropriate to their age.
You can give a kid a BB gun and then, figure out what happens.
Oh yeah, that's not a problem. But as it's appropriate to their age,
yes,
she won't touch a firearm until she's so she won't fire a firearm until she's at least 5 or 6 or something like that.
When are you going to let her handle the cyber chainsaw, Josh?
Never the cyber chainsaw, but unless that is some sticker that comes up, because that would be cool. Let's be clear, that would be a very cool sticker. And I wonder who bought cyberchainsaw.com, which we've been discussing on the Discord. I'm not sure who that could be.
I don't know.
But she's already touched a firearm. Though,
that's scary in its own right. But we're talking about Flea.
Yeah.
Flea, I'm not sure that maybe it's a little bit growing up in the South. Maybe it's a little bit of ethnicity and culture. I wonder if it's perhaps not more so a generational thing. I remember when I was a kid, I think I was in first grade. I took I was hanging out with some buddies that happened to be second graders, so they were grown-ups, and we were playing, and we ended up walking to the local 7-Eleven store, and which was, in retrospect, probably about 2 miles away, and I had to cross a couple 6-lane highways to get to it. And I had I had my piggy bank. I had $4 or $5. I got to buy candy and a comic book and stuff like that, and I was so excited. And I remember coming back to the dinner table that night, talking to my parents and telling them about my adventures, and just watching the blood drain from their face and the jaws dropping, and they're like, "You did what?" And I was completely safe because I was with these grown-ups, these second graders. Looking back on it, I'm like, "Oh my God, why didn't I die?" But even just in the neighborhood I grew up in, 60s, 70s, just riding my bike around the neighborhood. I wouldn't dream of letting my kids, when they were younger, ride their bikes around the neighborhood the way I used to do. Forget the helmets, just the neighborhood and all the bad things that could happen. So I think a little bit of it is generational. That's my take on it.
Well, but also kind of you're alluding towards, Jeff, you grew up in a city. You have to remember, I grew up effectively in the country, right? I would, if I had kids today, and I have a ton of nieces and nephews, it's totally.
I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in the suburbs. It was not a city. But yeah, I mean, I had country cousins, and they were growing up. Well, in fact, also one of my early experiences visiting my country cousins, they let me drive the tractor. I was sitting on my dad's lap, or it was probably my cousin, the farmer's lap, and I was driving the tractor, and we were going across this little bridge across a creek, and I started steering it off the bridge, and they were like, "Don't let them do that." So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more opportunities to, it's survival of the fittest, sink or swim. There's not enough of that. There's not enough of that these days.
Well, the advantage is that kind of upbringing, I think, helps build self-reliance and resilience. Full disclosure, I am a Boy Scout, so like all of those things still actually shape how I view the world today, and what I actually think is useful. And I think some of this even applies to our industry of security, like helping people learn to be calm during an incident. That's actually a critical skill set. It's like, hey, how do you take a breath, take a step back, analyze the situation that you're in, and then start thinking about proper actions to take and not just emotional actions. And that's still something we actually struggle with in the industry. Like, obviously, like I have a C in front of my title, so technically I'm supposed to be that pointy-haired boss that is supposed to freak out and say like, oh, I need this incident resolved quicker, I need to do et cetera. And how do you make sure that you as a responder or an IC can have the resilience to push back and have the resilience to actually remain calm in some of these, stressful situations. But I think, having people exposed early to, risk taking, thinking about what the impact of some of the risks are going to be, learning to actually be calm in a crisis. And even as a kid, you have your mini crisis. Like I remember one time, we were playing with fireworks out in the middle of nowhere, as kids are wont to do in the late 70s, early 80s. And we set part of a field on fire. So, okay, well, now we have a bunch of kids. Okay, we have a situation. What are we going to do about it? Like, obviously we could have all freaked out, but no, instead we actually took a breath. And it's like, okay, we don't want to get in this kind of trouble, so let's actually figure out how to resolve the situation. And I think those skills, that discipline is still useful even today as an adult, and I think it's even useful for more people inside the industry to get comfortable. And I think we said this before, a lot of our industry is really figuring out how to get comfortable being uncomfortable and making good decisions in a time of crisis. And this is, when I think about bringing more people into the industry, like one of the areas I think is still underutilized, undertapped is actually our armed services, and people that are in, the in whatever branch they're in, even Marines. I know we like to give them a hard time, but like people who are actually really good at assessing a situation, thinking about the risks, thinking about how to actually mitigate those risks, and calmly making decisions to actually improve the position and improve the current status that they're in. So.
The Discord conversation and our conversation, the juxtaposition between the two is fascinating. It's just fascinating. So tell Flea, you grew up in the South. Do you have siblings? Where do you rank in terms of order of magnitude in your family?
Yeah. So I am the youngest. If you are from the South, you know that people will just refer to me as the baby. It doesn't matter. Like I'm, even if you're 50, people still call you the baby. Like up until my grandmother's, like last day on Earth, like, and I had to have been like pretty close to 40 at that time. She was still like, "Hey, how's the baby doing?" I do have a brother. He's in the Navy. Actually, he's retired now. I have, two sisters also. So in the South, it's actually a small family. So it's only four kids, wow. And obviously my parents as well. So.
Mm-hmm. And where in the South are you from?
Mississippi. We are kind of which and despite like all the stereotypes and things like that you hear, a lot of them are true, unfortunately. It actually really is a beautiful state. Unfortunately, it's a state that actually has a lot of problems. It's not high on my list of places to relocate, but I actually am really thankful that's where I grew up, because it offered a lot of opportunities and an experience that I still value that I don't think I would have had if I'd grown up somewhere else. Right?
The beaches in Mississippi are gorgeous. The casinos. Yeah, I used to live in Louisiana, and we'd go up to Mississippi to vacation effectively because you could drive up there, hit a beach, just drive until there was nobody that you could see on the beach. Pull over, that beach was yours. It was amazing, And then you want to go to dinner, you'd head to one of the casinos, have a very nice dinner for ridiculously low price, watch a show. It was lovely. So yeah, it's beautiful in its own way, but its own way is very, very strange.
I love it when I tell people that I'm from Mississippi because the reaction is always the same. The reaction is always like, oh, essentially it sounds like you're describing a third world country. It's like, oh yeah, it's so cheap there. We can go. There's nobody around, etc. Unfortunately, some of that is definitely true. But like I said, it still has problems, but it definitely gave me a lot of opportunity and just things that I still value in my life. Like Mississippi still is a state that there is a high premium on family and community and things like that I value. There's a high premium on manners, and I personally think that learning early that manners are important, how we actually interact with each other, how we treat each other with respect, regardless of where you are on the economic spectrum, is still super important. Like, it's funny because as an adult, I realized that, oh yeah, we didn't have money growing up. But as a child, that never occurred to me. And it had to do a lot with a lot of the culture that was there in Mississippi. But also, yeah, I mean, effectively, most people in Mississippi are poor. So that doesn't hurt either. But it also inspired us to also be really creative. It inspired us to figure out the things in life that really mattered, because money really wasn't that thing, right? And the things that were bringing us joy, we got to discover what brings you joy truly as a human, decoupled from the pressure of having money. So I benefited from that. I'm super, super thankful for that. I would never take my childhood, and replace it with somebody else's, because I think my parents did a phenomenal job, and I really enjoyed how I grew up. So.
Yeah, what you just said is an incredibly profound statement in terms of, gleaning happiness and joy out of life or your career, and not basing it on money. And I'll say flat out, I think that's a thing that a lot of us paler people need to learn. Well, it's a lesson for everybody to learn, frankly. I'm curious, though, having said that, I was going to ask, and I'll squish these two together. You made that value judgment statement, which I absolutely think is profound, and yet you're now living in the Bay Area working for a large company. But my question is, how did you get out? How did you get, from a socioeconomic perspective, how did you get from the deep South Mississippi? I don't know if you were growing up in the Delta area or whatever, but how'd you get from point A to point B?
Yeah. So, as the cliche joke, and Dr. Gary McGraw saying this also, I found a pair of shoes and I learned to read. But not non-flippantly, the high school I went to was a math and science school. It was a residential high school, so I lived there with a bunch of other nerds. Just historically in my family, academics have always been super, super important. And in fact, so important, one of the family heirlooms is essentially this illegal slate board. And it's an illegal slate board because it was a slate board that was passed down from my great grandfather and others that was, they were learning to read as slaves. Right. And so the value of education is something that's always been super, super important to my parents. Mm-hmm. Even though we didn't have money, they made sure that every single one of us went to college. Every single of four on, just my dad's salary, and et cetera. So I got it was super important for my parents that we, were well disciplined, that we're always focused on working hard, that I think, since probably even starting in the 8th grade, I was already like applying for scholarships and these kind of things. I was fortunate enough to get a National Merit Scholarship to University of Oklahoma, which is actually one of the schools I really wanted to go to, because at the time they also had an extraordinarily good electric vehicle team, and that was one of the things I wanted to focus on. So that's how I ended up getting out of Mississippi. That was a step up. And going out to see a different state and different experience, having access to the facilities there at the University of Oklahoma, and even more so having access to some of the professors that were there. Like, there's a great computer science professor, Dr. Tritton. She's actually still there, I believe, at OU. She was a great mentor, an advocate, and sponsor for me. There's also a great professor in the electrical engineering school, Dr. Fagan, who allowed me as like this crazy student to be involved in all of his projects. Like, he was working on autonomous flight at the time. He was also working on some things with the electric vehicle team, and that gave me a lot of great exposure into things that I was passionate about, which is all about building. And my hobby of hacking, I didn't give that up while I was in college, but I was just never really a primary concern for me, because still, like, at the time, I didn't think that was not a business. That was just something you did for kicks.
Interesting. Hey, we could keep talking, but I suppose we should wrap this up. And of course, we could keep it going as we have time we can jump over to the after party. Flea, it's been interesting and a joy to get to know you a little bit on the show, and look forward to your contributions in the future. Welcome to the team. Welcome to the family. Random question for you, just simply a yes or no, and we can chat more. Well, actually, I'll save my question to you for the after party. Need to wrap for today. Just a reminder to our audience, again, in 2 days, we're going to be doing that unlocked thing. So please join in there. Next Tuesday, we are, as we already started doing on Discord, we're going to be talking about penetration testing, what it is, what it ain't, what it could be, what it should be, what it'll never be, and all those types of things, with a certain smattering of PCI thrown in for good measure. So hope you can join us next week for that discussion, and then we're going to take a break for the holidays. Come back in 2021. We'll kiss this year goodbye. That's going to do us for us today. Look forward to seeing you at the after party. Thanks.